Well, good evening and welcome to a very reduced and likely short edition of the Carolina Weather Discussion. I'm Ricky Matthews, not even in the state of North Carolina right now. Usually I'm at UNC Charlotte with UNCC Weather, but for the summer months I'm up here in Hampton, Virginia, where we're currently experiencing some thunderstorms. So if you hear a random loud clap of thunder, that's why. Most of our panel members either have some type of technical difficulty or Scotty is currently in Key West, Florida, or Key Largo, one of the two. Anywhere. He's down in the nice, warm parts of Florida, enjoying the weather down there. Left us to deal with the thunderstorms, and Joey had computer issues, and Sam, I don't know where he is, and Matt is at the Fire Academy getting training, so it's just you and I, Russell. I guess that's a good thing, considering it was you and I who rode out Hurricane Arthur last week, and that's going to be our topic tonight.
Yeah, it's gonna be great. Of course, I'm Russell, and I control and manage severe weather Eastern North Carolina, and it basically covers from Central and Eastern North Carolina, from Elizabeth City to Wilmington to Raleigh, Henderson, Fayetteville, and all points in between. Even down here in Eastern North Carolina, we got some storms happening now, and we had some severe weather earlier, especially on the far western side of the viewing area, like in the Triad, North and West. So we'll point those out as we're going along.
Yeah, let's go. Let's recap the hurricane first, and then we'll go into the thunderstorms and talk a little bit about that. It was funny. I was driving home because I took a detour through the Dare County area and up through the Outer Banks, and I started talking to this one guy who owns a bird store out there in Kitty Hawk, and I mentioned severe weather Eastern North Carolina, and he knew your page, so I know all about you all throughout Eastern Carolina. So.
Yeah, the hurricane was very interesting. We point out as we're riding out the storm of how you see in movies where it's just a constant wind and there's heavy rain and stuff flying in the air, but this one was more like gust after gust rather than a sustained damaging wind type event. So it's a very fascinating storm, and I actually have a story to share. My neighbor below me is actually a park ranger for Cape Lookout National Park, and we got to talking yesterday about how the birds got sucked into the hurricane, and they're actually now finding dead birds on the island that is not really native to North Carolina. So I will go into some of that, and we'll actually pull up that radar that actually shows the birds and the debris that's not, precipitation type inside the eye of the hurricane as we're talking about this.
Yeah, that'll be interesting because I know a lot of people in just the whole meteorology community were interested in what that was and whether it was actually birds or not. People were calling me during the storm asking if I was seeing any birds in the eye. But let's step back to when the storm first started. And Hurricane Arthur kind of originated as a upper level low that formed over the Carolina coastline and tracked offshore and interacted with a stalled frontal boundary and kind of formed on the trough there. And then it hung around off the coast of Florida for 2 days or so and really got its act together before an approaching front from the west picked it up and helped carry it to the north. But the real debate during its whole life cycle was if it could get rid of the dry air and how well it would take that to the north and where it was going to go when it headed north. And as you and I both know, Russell, it ended up heading right towards your hometown.
Yeah, in case for those who doesn't know where I'm stationed, I'm actually on the Crystal Coast in a town called Beaufort, which is the second oldest city in North Carolina, and it actually is located between Morehead City and some of the other towns to my east will be like Harkers Island and Cape Lookout, and I can actually see Cape Lookout outside my window. So those who doesn't know the area, and it's very vulnerable. It sticks out like a sore thumb, and it catches any low pressure system, whether if it's tropical, non-tropical, nor'easters. It just comes and nails us right on dead on.
Yeah, it was just so ironic for me going down there, and you and I both had a feeling something was going to hit. And I know a lot of people who are local usually get that feeling before the storm. It's like they just know it's coming to them. I've had that before tornadoes, but the Hurricane Center kept having their track offshore. And finally, at 5 p.m., 5 hours before it made landfall, 6 hours, the Weather Service finally shifted that track straight over us. And that's when we got the oh crap thought and wondered what it was going to be like. But
Yeah, since I'm native here and been through all these hurricanes, and a question for you: how was your experience in the first hurricane, especially as a cat too? And what was the emotions as we went through the storm of what were you thinking is going to happen versus what didn't happen?
Well, I was, as you mentioned before, I was just shocked at how, I guess maybe weak the winds were. I've been through Hurricane Isabel before, but that was in 2003, and I was in fifth grade at the time. And I can't remember if it was sustained winds or gusts. I swear, I think it was more like a gusty storm, kind of just like this one was, where it wasn't really sustained constantly. This storm, I was measuring the winds of, really only measured sustained winds of maybe 40 miles per hour throughout the whole duration. And then we would get those stronger gusts in the eye wall, and we got up to 70, 80 miles per hour. And then on the backside of the eye wall you were measuring, I know you got, what, 98 miles per hour or so?
I did.
Yeah, so I mean, it was interesting how gusty it was. I think the one thing that shocked me was, and things I've learned because it was a learning experience for me too, was how much the size of a hurricane really impacts the surge. Because maybe it's just your location. You know, you see water all around you. I'm thinking the whole area is going to be underwater. And even right when the eye was hitting, Russell and I walked out down to the waterfront during the eye of the hurricane, and you could barely tell there was a storm there. I mean, it was what, maybe like a 1 foot tidal departure or so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess those were the two biggest things, and then just riding out the hurricane and going through the eye wall and into the eye and then back into the eye wall was quite frankly the most amazing meteorological phenomenon I've ever experienced. To go from strong gusty winds like that to, oh look, it's calm, and then realizing when the raindrops started falling again that you needed to start running and it was going to come down pretty hard from the backside as well, even stronger really in this storm. The back eye wall was much stronger.
Yeah, that's usually what happens, especially here in North Carolina, where the back end of the hurricane is much stronger than the initial start of the storm. And it actually proved in this case, you measured 70, 75 miles per hour winds as the storm was coming in, and then on the backside, after we took shelter, it actually blew up to almost 100 miles per hour. Some of the actual wind gusts of the area, Cape Lookout got a 101 miles per hour wind gust, and then everybody else fares roughly between 70, 75, maybe an 80 miles per hour wind gust from as far inland as Emerald Isle all the way up to the Outer Banks and maybe some of the counties along the Sounds. But of course, a lot of that was airport observation, and some of the weather stations stopped working during the height of the storm. And we had some other teachers out there that we knew, like Sam and Dan and Nick, and they were all in the area. And they pretty much fared the same way, where the tide didn't come up as much, and the winds didn't really do that much of a damage versus on the backside where most of the damage came from.
Yeah, I think the biggest flooding.
And some of the
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was getting ready to mention that the worst flooding actually came around Hatteras North to Manteo, and you probably drove through the area. And if you want to give a recap on that.
Yeah, I had started seeing pictures come out in the early morning hours of some homes with water in them and parking lots and stuff flooded across the Nags Head area, Manteo, and I decided, all right, I'll detour through there just to see what's going on and also see how bad the storm was over there. And that had to be probably the biggest story for North Carolina, was just the flooding on the Sound side, which honestly, you know, it wasn't too significant compared to some previous storms and how the surge has hit us, but it actually hit at low tide, which was a saving grace for this storm. But there was some minor tidal flooding to maybe moderate tidal flooding across the Manteo area, Nags Head. When you come over US 64, they had to shut that down for a while. And you could see where the rocks and bigger rocks had been lifted up and thrown on the road, because there were pieces of some of the larger rocks sitting out there in the middle of the interstate. I also walked along where the Sound was, along the barrier wall and the rocks, and there were some fish that had been stranded out there on the other side. So that gives you an indication how high the water was. It was pretty high in that area for a while.
Yeah, and I've been listening to some of the locals here, and they were describing how the beach is so much different after the storm. Normally, some of the islands, some of the deserted islands, like Carrot Island, that has all the wild horses, and Shackelford and Cape Lookout, how you'll have to go over several dunes to get to the beach. But now there's no dunes at all. So each storm that comes through, there's like a new landscape. And I'm still looking into the different social medias about making sure the wild horses on Shackelford are accounted for, and so far they're still counting, and so far none has turned up dead, which is best news. And so, like I mentioned before on Swink, where the horses has been there for hundreds of years and been through tons and tons of storms, and they know how to survive more than we do.
Probably better.
Which is even better, which is kind of unique.
Speaking of animals, let me bring up that, or unless you've got it up, let's bring up that dual pole image there. Do you have it handy, or do you want me to go find it?
I think I found Irene's set of authors.
All right, I can find it here. Hang on.
And as he's pulling that up, Irene had the same problems where they had birds get trapped in the eye, and then hundreds and thousands of miles away, we get birds to land in Canada and New York and Maine that's not native to the area. And normally we get birds that migrates from south to north or north to south, and they get trapped in that eye wall where the storm is calm and the winds are calm and there's no rain falling. And the birds just like sit in there until they find a body of lake or a large body of water for them to take shelter in as the storm going through. So, Ricky, you want to explain what we're seeing here?
Yeah, this is what the Weather Service calls dual polarization products. On the left, you've got your normal reflectivity that most people are used to seeing on TV. It's how heavy the rain is, and it's the same. The darker the colors, the heavier the rain, or the brighter the colors, I should say. And then on the right, you've got what's called, I believe this is ZDR. There's many different types of dual pole products that can tell you what it is, from hydrometer classification to ZDR, its correlation coefficient. But this is one of the products, and you notice the distinct different color inside the eye, and that color correlates to biological objects or insects and birds that had been trapped inside the eye of the hurricane. And so we were able to follow them inside the eye all the way until they made landfall. And then somebody else posted a picture on Twitter today, I don't have it with me, but when it made landfall up in Nova Scotia and moved through those areas, there was still dual polarization picking up on some of those birds inside of the area, which I thought was pretty fascinating. You go back to where you said birds travel so far, and inside the eye of the hurricane, it seems to be true. Imagine finding a bird from North Carolina all the way up there in Nova Scotia.
Yeah, and there's been one report of a black pelican that's sitting in Nova Scotia right now. And when Irene came through, there's been several bird rescues where they have caged the birds and traveled them back down to the East Coast where they're supposed to be with their native climate. And so several birds has died in the process, and there's been several found here on Cape Lookout. The park ranger that lives below me was telling me that there's been several birds that normally you'll find in down in South Florida, down in the Bahamas, and it's been traveling with the storm as it gathers strength, and it's been dumped here on the islands. And some has even been found up as far north as Nova Scotia and Newfoundland, where they were hit with a massive windstorm, of course, by the same hurricane. And she was also telling me how the same storm as Hugo, when she experienced Hugo down to South Carolina with birds, has been traveled as far in as Charlotte, and it's been they'll just find bodies of waters to take shelter and refuge in, and then they'll start back up their departure once the storm passes, which I found very unique.
Yeah, that's a new one for me, and I guess I just never realized it happened in storms. But I mean, it's probably been happening for years. You mentioned Irene. I think there was one back from the superstorm up in the Northeast too that had that, or the Great Storm, Perfect Storm, whatever they call that magical one up there.
Yeah, and they call bird hurricane chasers or hurricane bird chasers, something like that, where photographers will actually go and follow the storm in, but instead of chasing the storm, they chase the birds and see what kind of new birds that they can seek out, or what kind of birds that actually traveled in, and what are ones that are actually left with the storm, which I'm still looking into, which is kind of fascinating to see photographers find unique birds in unique places.
Oh, another image I want to show here in a second is when we were riding out the storm, I had my phone with me, and the Galaxy S4 has a barometer built into it. So I went back and looked about 2 or 3 days after, and you can actually see the pressure drop during the storm. So this was a week-long pressure indication, but notice how we go through the week and the pressure starts to fall as the storm approaches, and then right there as I start driving down towards North Carolina and the storm approaches, it drops significantly as the eye comes over, down to 977 millibars. I don't know, Russell, what was the actual pressure reading officially at the time. That's what my phone recorded.
Yeah, I think it was 972 when it made landfall.
Okay.
973.
Well, I mean, regardless, I thought it was pretty cool how it went so far, down and actually picked up that pressure drop when the storm moved over. I didn't set my GPS to go back and factor in elevation, whatever elevation is down there. I assume it's not more than probably about 10 feet or so along the coastline.
Yeah, and I'm going to pull up the wind speed in the area. This will be Fort Makins, which is about a boat around the island for me. And let me screen share it. And here you can see the wind speed plot for Fort Macon, and you can see where as the storms come in, the wind will increase from around 30 to 40 miles per hour by 6 o'clock, and then it spikes all the way up to near 90 around 10 o'clock. The eye of the storm made landfall between 11 and midnight, and the wind speed just dropped all the way down to 20, if not 0. We got down to 0 miles per hour here, and then it spiked all the way back up to 90 when the back end came ashore, and then the wind speed just gradually elevated as the storm departs, which I found it very, very, very unique, and it's rare to see proof on weather flow and other data that we use in the area to see the actual storm and actually the size and the speed of the storm. And then, of course, the image next to it is Hatteras Islands flooding, where during the tidal cycle, when the storm came in, it flooded some of the low-lying areas.
And there's the eye right there, the image you're showing. And satellite was showing the eye pretty pronounced all the way. I guess it first formed it on satellite about a day and a half earlier off the Florida coastline, and I remember tweeting a picture out of it, and then it just kept that distinct eye all the way northeast.
Oh yeah, and of course the help with the dry air where it gets sucked into the center of the storm, it just keeps drying out the inside, making it look like it's a hurricane. But it is true that a tropical storm can have an eye, it can have a very distinct eye, versus like a Cat 5 can have, where it's so clear and pronounced in the center, versus a very sloppy storm where it's just all messed up.
Mm-hmm. Let's go back and talk a little bit about the past history of Arthur, and I'll let you cover that one because I know you know it a little bit better than me, the past storms that have hit, and then we'll transition over into the storms for this week, unless you have anything else to add.
All right, so let's talk about the past storms, and of course I'm more of the tropical type forecasters for the area, and a lot of people kind of watches what I do. And so I'm going to pull up a website called Historical Hurricane Tracks, and it actually pulls up all the tracks of past hurricanes. So as soon as I get that up, I will give you some examples. And let me screen share so you can see what I'm doing. And I can also post the link on the Carolina Weather discussion page, and we'll share it across the other pages that follows and uses this. Let's see if I can get it up. And this website is owned by the NOAA, the National Oceanic Atmospheric, and you can choose a location anywhere along the East Coast, Gulf Coast, Pacific, Indian Ocean, wherever you feel like looking at. You can choose a location, which we will choose the Crystal Coast and the southern Outer Banks, and you can see where the hurricane strikes, and you can see how many storms has hit the area as soon as it loads. And one of the storms that I'm really fascinated was a Category 1 hurricane to hit this area back in the early 1900s in December, which I'm still looking into that. So here we have all the hurricanes that's either made landfall or passed through inland, offshore. And let me get it zoomed in. And you can highlight each line that shows the different strength of hurricanes and the year, the time, how many people was affected, the damage that was caused. So for example, I'm going to choose the red line because the red line, of course, the darker the color, the stronger the hurricane. So this one would be the no-name hurricane of 1879, and it looks to be a Cat 3 hurricane that came right over the city here in Beaufort. And on the bottom left, you can see the wind speed of the whole history of the storm, when it made landfall, and the pressure. And of course, the older the storm, the less information you'll get. So let's find something uh, more recent. It's going through random storms. Of course, the pink lines will be the Category 4s. And in history, as far as I know, North Carolina has never experienced a Cat 5 hurricane, but there's been some records of people's clothes being blown off because of the strong winds, and there's just some crazy stories that I've read in this area and across the Outer Banks. So this hurricane is Helen back in 1958. Of course, some people may remember the storm. Of course, it was very catastrophic with winds around 130, 125, sustained with higher gusts. Did an incredible amount of damage in the area, the flood tides. Of course, we'll post this link on our website, and you can play with it. You can't really mess it up. You can print off favorite hurricanes. You can save hurricanes. And I'm going to pull up the county strikes that shows which counties gets the most is most vulnerable for storms to come through. Let's see if I can get rid of this. And of course, the Outer Banks and the counties surrounding the Sounds usually is the most vulnerable. They get around 20 strikes every 20 years, like once a year. And of course, the inland county gets it when the storm tracks inland, like up 95, up 40, like Fran did. Floyd was up 17. So it's a very unique website, and we'll post it as soon as we close out here.
And Russell, let's go back and talk about the birds real quick, because I just want to recap and make sure I had everything right. You said they found birds on Cape Lookout from where?
Somewhere down in South Florida. I can't remember what bird she named it. It's like a black sea.
Black pelican, you said, I think, earlier?
Yeah, a black sea pelican or something.
Uh-huh. Okay. Because I tweeted it out that they found birds from Florida, Bahamas, and the Caribbean down there, and that people are really interested in that. So, knowing them, they may be a WRAL crew at Cape Lookout here in a few days. So, all right. So let's transition over, and I think we've got Lee Davis joining us from some of the western areas of North Carolina. Lee, not sure if you're mic. There you go. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey, my name's Lee Davis. I cover the Forsyth County, Yadkin County, Surrey County areas. Some of the western areas. I'll actually be going up to Appalachian State next year, so I'm going to be covering Boone and the surrounding areas. So I'm pretty excited about that.
You'll have to get up with our buddy Mike Cox up there and meet up with him on Twitter.
Okay, I'll definitely look into that.
So, Russell, let's mention basically the setup for the next couple of days and then the impacts from that. And Lee, if you want to comment on your area as well, we can talk about the thunderstorm risk and then wrap this thing up here after about 40 minutes or so.
Sounds good to me.
All right, so I'll let Russell take over kind of the synoptic setup and everything. I think you're still muted there, Russell.
All
There you
right.
go.
All right, so basically we have a approaching cold front that's coming in tonight. We saw some storms today, especially across the Raleigh area, down in the Sandhills and northeastern part of the state. And the cold front is expected to stall over the region tomorrow through Friday, which will give us a decent amount of rain, especially some strong storms that could produce some strong winds and some small hail. The stall front would then weaken and dissipate over the weekend, and then we'll expect the high pressure to build in into the region next week, and we'll still expect the typical thunderstorms thanks to the strong heating of the day and the higher dew points. And we'll get the sea breeze going, especially tomorrow, and will last through all of next week.
And I think the thing with these storms that we saw today, Russell, in some areas, it's going to be the heavy rain. Let's go ahead and I'll share the radar right now and show you what's going on. This is the Wakefield, Virginia radar. My phone's going crazy because people really like birds, apparently. There we go. We'll switch back. So this is the radar out of Wakefield, Virginia. We've still got a bunch of heavy rain across northeastern North Carolina, up towards Currituck, Elizabeth City, over towards the St. Bridge area, towards Norfolk, Virginia Beach, and then more storms developing down towards the Windsor area and Greenville and Edenton. And all that has just been heavy rain for about the past couple hours, especially over southeastern Virginia and northeastern North Carolina. So as we get more storms forming over the next few days on that stall frontal boundary, it makes me wonder about what our flooding risk is going to be like. I don't see a huge severe weather threat. The front really isn't making too much forward motion. I think if anything, you'll just have some gusty winds and heavy rain, but I don't see a big severe weather threat.
Yeah, I agree. It's not going to be such a widespread event, and it's going to be mostly localized, especially if we get pockets of sunshine after a decaying storm and get debris clouds from nearby storms, and also outflows where cool air rushes outside of a storm could develop new storms and could quickly put down a downburst winds that could do some minor damage here and there. And the radar you're showing is the radar you're seeing currently is eastern North Carolina, across Pitt County and up across Windsor, and it's what you mentioned earlier. And then we have some storms across the North Carolina-Virginia border from Henderson to Roxborough, Yanceyville. Those are decaying storms that produced some severe weather earlier. Produced a 40 miles per hour wind gust in Greensboro, and there was a pocket of hail in northern parts of Burlington, which there was no confirmed reports in that area. And also in Halifax County, there was some trees down in Scotland Neck that there was some trees to come down with that severe storm earlier. Overall, we should be winding down as the sun sets, but there could be a few isolated storms as the front approaches.
And Lee, what about for your region out west?
Well, I've been focusing mainly to the west of Forsyth County. Past 2 days, I've been focusing mostly in Yadkin County, Yadkinville. I actually took a trip, or ventured out yesterday afternoon and got some good photos of the storm. Actually, you guys know the one that I posted that was I can't remember who it was, that WRL or not. No, it wasn't WRL. It was I think it was News 2 shared that photo, and then it got on that Weather Nation. So that storm was pretty good yesterday. It had a pretty nice shelf on it, and it kind of fell apart after that, but I captured a pretty good photo there. And then today I went back over there to Yadkin County, and there was a pretty good looking storm there for a while, and then it did the same thing. It fell apart, and it just became a lot of rain. But overall, it's been pretty quiet here in Forsyth County. Not a lot to talk about. They did see a couple storms in Charlotte today. There's a few that went severe. But yeah, that's basically it for my region.
Yeah, those storms in Charlotte were mainly on the western side of Mecklenburg County, up towards New York County area as well, and in Gaston. County, most of that area, it's I think the downtown or what we call uptown area also had a pretty big storm move through in center city. They like to call it like 5 different things. I never know what to call it, but we'll go with uptown for now. So some big storms through there, and some more chances for some storms for the next couple of days. But welcome to summer in North Carolina, I guess.
Yeah,
All right.
definitely.
Well, any further thoughts by you guys on this storm, or anything else you wanted to hit on before we wrap it up?
Nope, nothing.
Well,
nothing here.
All right.
Yeah, there's really nothing around here. The next few days? How's it looking for storms?
I mean, it really depends on where you're at. In terms of eastern Virginia and eastern North Carolina, you're going to have that stall front, which is going to help trigger some storms, and I think there'll likely be some storms in western Carolina as well, but probably not any severe storms. I think you'll just be dealing with those pop-up multi-cellular thunderstorms that pop up and then rain themselves out, but they can be pretty notorious for flash flooding. So.
Yeah,
all right.
You'll get some pulse storms and definitely.
All right. Well, as always, you can follow me on Twitter at WXRJM or on Facebook at RickyMatthews-WXRJM. You can follow our page on Facebook if you look up the Carolina Weather Discussion. The same thing here on Google+. We're a Carolina Weather Group, I think, actually, on Google+. So if you're looking on there, you may see us a little bit differently. So, Russell?
And you can also find me on Facebook, Severe Weather Eastern North Carolina. If you can't find it, you can actually Google it, and we're the first one on the search bar. The page is always open for newcomers, and it's 24-hour whenever I can get a chance. And you can also follow Weather Discussion. We have a Facebook page, and we're always posting things and make sure everybody's ahead of the storm.
And Russell does not sleep, by the way.
No. Coffee don't exist.
All right, Lee, you want to throw a plug in?
Yeah. And you can follow me. You can follow me on Flickr. And you can it's Lee Davis .stormchaser, and you can also follow me on Twitter. It's Lee Davis WX. So yeah, and you can find me on Facebook too. I'm on.
All right, sounds good. Thank you for joining us tonight, and remember, if it's not a Carolina weather discussion, it's not a discussion at all.